Hello everyone, Riccardo Maslin here, and this is vlog, and this vlog is about Poltava. Poltava, 1709, Russians vs Swedes, a game by Italian war game designer Marco Campari for Polish producer Taktika I Strategia. What is Poltava? Well, Poltava is a game, is a module for the Husaria system. The Husaria system is the system by Wojciech Zaleski, the owner and author of Taktika Strategia, dedicated to battles from the end of the 17th century to the very beginning of the 18th century. It was a very interesting moment of transition. Here we are at the end of that period, 1709, and we are at the Great Northern, in the Great Northern War. A war in which Sweden tried to reassert its power with King Charles of Sweden, its power over the northern part of Europe. King Charles attacked many nations in the northern part of Europe to reassert the power that had been established by his ancestor King Gustavus Adolphus during the 30 Years' War, and defeated many of these enemies until he came he went against the Russians led by Tsar Peter the Great, and essentially King Charles attacked and won many battles, but instead of going east towards Moscow or St. Petersburg, he went south in his invasion towards Ukraine. Yeah, that's not the news. He went south and then there at Poltava in modern day Ukraine, he was faced with Tsar Peter the Great's main army. What happened here is that the Swedes were faced with a line of redoubts. They had to overcome these redoubts, but a part of their army did not get past those redoubts, continued fighting here. The other part went after, but it was uncoordinated, it was very damaged, and here they faced finally the main Russian army led by Peter that had got out of their entrenched camp. And after that the Swedes attacked, but they were ravaged by Russian artillery and then could not break the Russian lines, and the battle was a devastating defeat for King Charles, that essentially lost his kingdom more or less, and most of all he lost the war, and the Great Northern War was lost by Sweden, and Sweden was no longer a great European power after this war. So a very consequential battle that has been the subject of some simulations, but in general not many highly detailed simulations such as this one. But what I really like about the system itself, and also by Marco's rendition of this battle, by Marco Campari's rendition in this game, is that this is a very simple game. It is essentially a classic X and counter game that is not far from our dear old SPI or Avalon games, and it has a simple turn sequences, artillery, movement and combat, nothing fancy here. But what do we have here? Many small rules and mechanics that really recreate this period. For example, in the movement phase, you may have defensive artillery fire by the non-active player, by the inactive player, and then also counter charges. The cavalry of the inactive player can attack all the moving units inside a certain range from themselves, all the moving units of the active player. And then there is combat. But in combat we have musketry, rifle. The real book says rifleman, but it's musketry here in this era. And musketry, also we have defensive musket fire by the inactive player. And after that, after those first three phases, everything switches to the other player, to the inactive player, to player B, that then becomes the active player, and so on. Very, very easy, very classic here. But also we see a very dynamic, a lot of action and reaction. Other interesting thing, the losses are accumulated here. They're not totally removed from the map. They are accumulated here in these boxes, and at every turn half of these boxes are returned here a leader, a bit like Man of Iron. I'm not a big fan of this rule, but in this very limited fashion it really works. Why? Because when these boxes full, if you, for example, you manage to kill 5 units in a single turn, this box is emptied and these units are lost. So there are drastic steps, a bit like Saladin, and I really like that because it is a nice correction to that regeneration rule, as I call it. Also, here it is not seen, but here we have a track of the army morale. Every single time you lose an engagement, your army morale gets 1 step lower. And there are areas, a bit like in battles of the American Revolution and also in the medieval system by Tattica e Strategia, and there are modifiers. So the more you lose engagements, the more you have negative modifiers. So you have to turn a tide, and so to take risks to turn a tide. So every engagement is not a closed war. The armies see what's happening. So you have to maintain the morale of your army. Also, there are many rules for special units. Many of those are not present in this module in particular. For example, you have Hussars, Polish Hussars. They have their heavy lances, the kopje, but you have a limited amount of kopje. And if the enemy destroys your carriages, all your kopjes are lost, as all the ammo for the musketry fire. You have carriages, you have Tatars, yeah, that is horse archers for some of the scenarios. All of these small things. In Poltava, especially, in this game there are many scenarios. There is the battle against the Redoubts here. The first phase looks like a bit of World War I battle, terrible. And this one, that is a good introductory scenario for the system, because here the Swedes are really in danger. They're not in a very good situation. It is very hard for them to win this scenario, but it is also very interesting and very good for learning the rules. And then there is the full battle. In a whole, since this system is so simple, so easy, classic wargame, I think that each of these 2 small scenarios you can play that in 2 hours, 2 hours and a half maximum, and the entire battle I would say 3 hours and a half, 4 hours maximum. So it is not impossible. This is not at all a monster game. Also, there are also additional rules to have possible additional troops that were not present, especially the Cossacks, the Don Cossacks and the Dnipro Cossacks. So also other options of what could have been. And in the great scenario of the full battle, you can set up the battle as you want. You can shape the battle as you want. The setup is very historical. It's a high historical research, very deep, but also there is much freedom to shape the battle in a totally different way. So, a very good rendition of this battle. The graphical component is great. It is one of the most beautiful war games I've ever seen. Take a look, for example, at the units. See, every regiment has its own. Let me see, has its own uniform. Here are the Swedes. So nice, thick counters, pre-rounded, setting look. Wow, fantastic. There are also rules for facing, for limited zogs. So you also have a great tactical element. All those components make these tactical elements, these engagements, and really all of these. Oh, and the single leaders each have their own portrait. Here we have Peter the Great. In here we have Charles, Karol the 12th. I don't know how 12 is spelled in Polish or Swedish. Sorry. Anyway, Fantastic map, great looking map, good player rates. The English rulebook is perfectly understandable. There are some bits and pieces of polish here and there, but they're not so bad. They're easy to understand what they mean. And here you have these setup sheets for these single scenarios. There are just a couple of errata. The horn there is Duker written on the counter, so you have these stickers to cut. There are a couple of mistakes here and there and stuff, nothing terrible. And I'm working with Marco to create a unified errata, but there are just a couple of units. This is a strange thing that there is no row 18 on the map, but this does not cause any great concern. Everything is adjustable. There are very just small pieces, absolutely not relevant. In general, this is a very high production for a very simple system that in one stroke gives you the great movement of the entire battle, but also, as I said, single tactical elements. When do I make my counter charges or my defensive artillery fire? Or how do I move my units with my facing without exposing my flanks to the enemy? And then there are the redemption, and then there are the different types of artillery. Absolutely a great game. And it is also very simple. I think that this can easily be the first war game for curious, for newcomers, especially if they have a more expert friend teaching them this game. You can teach this game to a total newcomer in minutes, and then you can play, and then you can have a lot of fun, especially with this last the phase of the battle scenario. So absolutely a very good war game. If you are an expert wargaming, you will be at home, you will learn it in no time. Absolutely. So a fantastic system and a very good module inside that system. I really recommend this game because as I said, it is nice, it is easy, it's classic, and it works, and it's fun, and it is a highly informative, highly researched game about this highly consequential battle. I don't know the availability outside of Europe, but I think that Technica Strategia has a good distribution even outside of Europe. In Europe, this is readily available, not such high a cost. It is a really fun game that will get you many times, and it will be a nice game in your collection. It's also a good starting point to discover the Husaria system. Once again, thanks to Marco and Tactica Strategia for this review copy, which is highly appreciated. Why? Since I already had I had bought for myself many other previous titles in the system. I was following this system, so I was looking for this particular title because I really like, I'm really interested in the Battle of Poltava. It is a highly fascinating subject. So after all that, thank you so much for being here. This is a highly recommended game. Give it a try. I think you will not be disappointed by this simple, classic, low to moderate complexity game that is really fun, that is really good, and really takes you back into this very interesting, fascinating, and consequential conflict. Thank you so much for having me here. This has been Riccardo Masini, and as always, don't be scared. It's just war games. Ciao.